Hey guys, Venom here. Today we got a little bit of a different kind of video. Today, me and the YouTuber Kanickii, channel down below, discuss what really qualifies as being a build. So enjoy the conversation and discussion, and check out his channel down below. And you guys have a good one. Okay, cool. Okay, so Kanickii, I saw your video. It popped up in my feed shortly after. I think it's because I'd actually, and I'm not by any way trying to pit my own channel or anything, but I'd actually just put out a build video myself, kind of going over like basics of builds and like that kind of thing. I put out I was running some clan members through Grandmaster for this season, and I hadn't realized that a couple of them had never done Grandmasters before. So me and a buddy who usually do Grandmasters, we were kind of going over like, hey, this is kind of the basics you need for Grandmaster. You know, this kind of build won't work because this reason, yada, yada, yada. And I realized that I hadn't really seen too many videos on, like I'd usually see like build videos, but not like why things work and why they didn't. So I think that's how you ended up coming across in my feed, because I'd put something out like that.
Yes.
Now, to be fair, I kind of criticized your build you put out there. I made a comment saying, well, what you'd put together wasn't really so much a build versus just kind of loadout. And I think you're using Star Eater scales with Sunshot. I think from what I could tell, you hadn't played too much into the Star Eater scale aspect part of it. It was more of here's how kind of things work, and this is what it can do. And I kind of criticized saying this doesn't look so much as a build. It looked more like just what you had as a loadout. Is that a fair assessment of what I put?
That is correct.
Okay. So, and you were basically came back saying, hey, you know, a build can be whatever. There's no real set rule on what a build is. And I kind of want to start from there, if that's, again, a correct assessment as to what you said.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. So, to your mind, what would be a build? What would be something you qualify as a build, or are there rules for one?
So I'll just start by stating my opinion on the whole thing, on like just the whole situation as a whole. Well, I think a build, like, not necessarily has to serve one single purpose. That's my opinion. I feel like, yes, there are builds that do focus on enhancing one specific aspect, like, to its fullest potential. But I don't think that can disregard any other builds that can, like you said, have a jack of all trades aspect and have a little bit of each. For example, the Star Eater Scales build that I had out wasn't necessarily built around the Star Eater scales. I'd say it was more for ad clear, and that I don't know how I put it together with clearing ads and using the Sunshot to make the solar explosions. I guess the Star Eater scales was more of like a bonus perk, a free slot per se, I guess. But I mean, there are exotics that when you make builds around them, you do have flexibility with what weapons you use and stuff like that. For example, Gerfalcons, you can use any void weapon to get that volatile round perk after you do proc it on Gerfalcons. But I just feel like saying that having only one singular purpose makes it build is wrong, in my opinion. That's just my opinion. But I feel like that there can be flexibilities, but there's going to be builds that are good and like really good in endgame, and like however you want to see it. And there's like exotics. For example, I made a build video a couple of weeks ago about the Triton Vice for the Hunter. People say it's bad and like you can't use it in anything, but that doesn't make it not a build. It's and like you can still use it. It just maybe not might be the best choice to use it. You wouldn't use it in GMs or anything like that, at least in this state of the game. But the game always changes. So you don't know what situation you're going to be in. There might be a situation like where you might need DPS and ad clear, maybe depending on your power level. And like the Star Eater Scale Solar build that I put out can help you with that. But if you're like up to power level and you don't really need that help on ad clear, you have weapons that are doing just the trick for you, and you just need a build that focuses on DPS and needs an exotic that like really just focuses on doing lots of damage, then yeah, you would pick one of those crazy elitists like trying to like perfect every last aspect of the build just to do damage. But I mean, that's just my opinion. Like I said, that's how I think about it or how I see it. You can go ahead and explain however you want to go from there.
No, I totally get what you're saying, too. And you're right. I mean, there are some builds that aren't necessarily good for one thing and then others, and there are some that are more better for, like you said, for ad clearing or that kind of thing. I guess the angle I'm coming from is that And again, I don't want to be an elitist or anything. I definitely, that's not what I'm trying to come across, but that is what it's coming across. If it is, that's not what I'm trying to do. But as far as moral, the spirit of builds, I mean, there's a couple things. I mean, one, you kind of went over the definition, or you were kind of asking the definition of a build. Builds typically do serve a purpose. I mean, that purpose can be, like you said, it can be ad clear, it can be a jack of all trades type build, but it does generally serve a purpose, and exotics do kind of play into that. Now, other exotics that don't necessarily boost a specific thing, or you use a Gelfalcon or Gelfuck. Sorry, I always have issues pronouncing words. You use Gearfalcon's Halberg as an example, and the Stardust Scales as another example. Stardust is a perfect kind of a neutral build thing, but it still serves a purpose for it. Now, you don't necessarily have to build towards what that purpose is, but if that be the case, you really don't even need an exotic for that. I mean, technically speaking, as long as you know what your gear does, you can technically call anything a build. Like, I can put on just whatever I want to, as long as I know how it functions. That technically just be a build. Typically for a build, it does serve a purpose. Now, it may be a purpose that's in game, it may be a mid or early game purpose, but they do typically serve a purpose. What that purpose is going to depend on the content you're doing. You sent out or put out the Gearfalcons for an example. You're right, that is one I'm actually wearing right now. It's an excellent exotic, but it does kind of have a certain way you're supposed to play around it, and you tend to build around that, and that is basically staying invisible. You typically are going to build that to with as much invisibility as possible to get you there to proc those weapons. And you're going to have void weapons to do that as well. For example, like on my screen, you can't see, but if you look at what I'm wearing right now, I've got on what is basically my Gearfalcon's build right now. I've got plenty of ways to make myself visible to proc all that, but the build itself is specifically aimed to turn invisible and clear ads very quickly and do early to mid game content, but it's not really going to hang in any kind of in-game content. For that, I'm going to need a very specific in-game build to do so, and you do kind of have to build around that. Now, you are right, you don't necessarily have to have a specific class-based exotic. Starter skills, let's use the build you were kind of showed off the other day. Again, you knew what everything did on it, but you're right, you didn't really lean into one thing or another. It was more of just kind of a general thing. It's not so much of a build as it is you do know what these things do. It's more of this is, hey, this is what I happen to be using. Each thing does something kind of cool on its own, but it doesn't really go anywhere. I mean, you can get through the content with it, obviously. I mean, you did pretty good damage with the setup you had. You understood how it worked, but you didn't really lean into one thing more of another. It's not really... And again, I'm not one to say what is and what isn't, but in the spirit of builds and what's typically seen as a build in the community, or what you typically expect to see as a build, that's not what you would traditionally see, or what you would... It's not really typically something that'd be in the spirit of builds. And builds do typically tend to have a purpose. Now, what that is, it depends on what you're using, but they do typically have a purpose. Now, can anything be a build? Technically, yes, but if everything's a build, then nothing's a build, you know what I'm saying?
I understand what you're saying. I mean, I get what you're saying. Like, in the community's eyes, yes, people might not see it as a build, but technically, like, a build is what you make of it. So if you put something together that creates a certain thing, that does a certain thing, and serves that purpose, whether that be a one singular purpose or multiple purposes, it doesn't take away the fact that it's still a build. Like, for example, we'll just go right back to Gearfalcons. Like, Gearfalcons is stating that after being invisible, your void weapons gain volatile rounds, and doing finishers grant bonus damage for all weapons and a reserve overshield for allies. So technically, there's multiple things that you could build into, like with Gearfalcons. You could just be doing finishers just to get that reserve overshield, and you could be using different weapons. Like, I see you have Word of Crota on right now with Repulsor Brace. You could be having reserve overshield plus Repulsor Brace giving you void overshield all the time, and that might not be as like seen in that build, but it's still a purpose in the build. Yes, you're trying to go invisible all the time, because whenever you debuff a target and then you kill it, like, you're going to go invisible, and after becoming invisible, your void weapons get stronger. So it might not be the main picture there, but there's still like many pieces, like, in certain builds where there are other purposes for having that exotic on. Not only is it allowing you to go invisible all the time, it's increasing your void weapon damage to, like, for any void weapon that you're using, and you're getting the reserve overshield. So there might not be like the main point. It's sort of like little side quests side quests, I guess, up until like the main quest. if that makes sense. That's the best analogy I can think of at the moment.
No,
But
that makes
like,
sense. That makes sense.
but like, there is a main purpose. Yes, like most of the times you're gonna build around that main purpose to do that. But there are separate purposes. Like how I was saying with the starter scales build, the main purpose of it is ad clear. Like that's mainly what I was going for, using Sunshot or Callus Money Tool with incandescent, and it's built around like applying scorch to people, and whenever you like apply scorch, you get your abilities back faster, and the weapons that you were using had incandescent to help apply that scorch so you could get your abilities back faster. But then I also had starter scales on, not to enhance that ad clear, but in case the time came where you needed to do DPS, whether you're in a raid or I don't know, like you said, you might not use it in all content, but like it might be beginning, middle, and end. But like I wouldn't say, oh yeah, it's end game content. If you're trying to beat stuff really fast and like grind through it, or if you're trying to do like GMs or something, like typically I wouldn't take that build into a GM. But for a raid, for instance, I would. Because if there's a lot of ad clear and you got to do damage to the boss, it's nice to not have to worry about either of those things because you can do both of those things. You know what I mean? It might not be for somebody that's just trying to get it done, like I said before, like they're not worried about the ads and stuff like that. They got the weapons that can handle it, and they're just focused on getting a build that's going to allow them to do a shit ton of damage at the end. But for somebody that might be newer or something, you might have even stated that somebody that's newer, like starting build, like somebody that's newer and isn't like comfortable with how the game works, or somebody that I don't know, is new to a raid or certain type of raid, they're not used to where the ads are coming up or what they're supposed to do. Like just having that kind of build on that's a jack of all trades just allows them to ease into whatever they're doing easier. But I don't, like I said, I don't think that takes away from it being considered a build when you, and I saw somebody else also said that it was like just a loadout, because somebody that's new might have no clue how to put that together or what weapons to use or what exotics do what, and like that combination of all that, like if they had Sunshot on with Arc Strider, yeah, for people that have played the game for a while, like it's gonna be like no brainers to them. Like it's gonna be like, oh yeah, you should know that, blah blah blah. But like people that are new or haven't played the game for a long time, or are returning and don't know about certain exotics and like what exotics, like starter scales works really well with Blade Barrage. You don't want them to use it with like a void subclass on Hunter or something like that. Like it's just having that there where it's like that jack of all trades, even though the stuff isn't like 100% synergizing to each other. Like starters can be used with any subclass, but like to know that you're getting really good damage with Blade Barrage, and not only by using that solar subclass, you can use the Sunshot or anything with incandescent to also do really good ad clear. Like it's just knowledge for them, I guess. It's like I said, it's not like end game, like use it for everything kind of thing. I don't know if how I explained that made sense. I'm trying to piece it together as I talk, but it's basically just like I just still don't think it's not considered a build. But like you said, in the community's eyes, when like you've played this game for a while, like most builds that people look for are something that focuses on doing one thing, whether that be ad clear in a certain thing or survivability or fucking doing a shit ton of damage on a raid boss or in a GM, like something like that. Like, yes, the community is going to look for those specific things, especially if you've played in the game for a while. But like I said, for like the lower tier newcomers or returning players that don't know about the game, it's a different story for them. Like everything is going to be new to them. Like they're going to want to try stuff out, stuff that's going to be fun and stuff that's going to work for them and stuff until they get progress far in the game, and they might find another build that focuses on something that they don't really have a build for. You know what I mean?
Yeah, true, and I kind of understand where you're coming from with that, but in kind of that situation, it's not so much. I'm try to not use the word build here, but it's not so much as you're showing. Well, I can't help it. It's not so much you're showing a build, and like I said, you're really just kind of showing at that point, really kind of showcasing what the mods are, or what the I forgot what they're called, what they call the keywords are. You kind of just really showcasing what the keywords are in that case, which is still good. But like I said, in that case, you're not really showing off of a build so much. You're just kind of showing what the keywords are and what some perks are and some weapons are that kind of work with it. It's still good. I guess, like you said, it's more like a bunch of side quests versus like the main quest. But like I said, typically there would be a main quest still in there. Would it typically be just a bunch of side quests?
Yes.
Like for your starter skills or build example. I mean, even if you're just using that one, using Star Eaters kind of as a backup to do that big damage while you're clearing ads, and this is where I admit I might be borderline going into more optimizing the build versus what actually a build would be, but there were quite a few things in there that could have definitely been improved or changed up to play more into what you were going for like ad clear with a big DPS setup, that kind of thing. For
Yes.
example, a lot of the stuff you kind of had on, you could have, like for starter skills, going into the energy regen like you're trying to do with the scorch spreading and with your starter skills, you could have very easily played into generating a bit more orbs with that, with some of the setups you had to feed into the skills while you were getting your class energy back. And this is not here nor there. I mean, I assumed you just like using a solar one. I think you kind of somebody asked during the raid you're doing. Just FYI, I think Gathering Storm actually does the most damage with Star Eaters, but that's just a side thing. So for the future, I think Gathering Storm is top DPS for that one right now. Blade Rush, I think, is a really close second. Because they ended up nerfing it after a little bit. I think we lost like a knife or something in there because I used to be top tier, but it's still one of the top ones. But you could have fed into that more, and that's the part where I'll admit I'm not sure if I think I might be crossing over into the border of optimizing the build or what the meta would be for it versus just here's what the build's supposed to do. And
Yes.
like I said, it seems more like it was just a combination of here are mods that work together, here's some perks on the weapons. Because what I saw on there is that I really could have swapped out anything that you were using, and it would have really done the same thing. Like I could have swapped your subclass and it wouldn't have really affected much because I could just change out one weapon or two and it does the exact same thing. If what you're doing can be accomplished, like if you can, the way I usually put it is, if I can swap out the exotic I'm using and I don't notice any difference, or I'm swapping out like main weapons and there's no real difference to what I'm doing, and it's not really a build. And that's just my personal thing for it. It's harder when you got something neutral like Star Eater Scales, because again, that's a neutral one, but that one is one to where, I mean, its whole purpose is that not only does it do massive super damage, it actually builds super faster. So actually playing around something to where you're getting orbs quicker would be a way to play into that. And on top of that, you can then use what the starters are doing to play into the rest of what your build was doing. You can get more orbs, which is going to give you more energy, which is going to play into those other skills as well. The scorch spreading and that kind of thing, that's more of a, okay, you're doing damage, but it's not really going to play into the starters so much because it's not really going to give you as many orbs to play into that starters. It's still going to clear the ads, but at that point, what you're doing is everything's going to clear the ads. So the question becomes, is it just really, are you clearing, well, and again, that's more optimizing, but that's a little different story. But it's more like what you showed off could be done by anything, and that's not necessarily a build, if that makes sense. Like if I can swap out almost everything that you have on and do the exact same thing, is it a build? Like, it seemed more like the mods themselves are what was doing it. Like, the weapon perks, those are good. Those definitely would be a good start for the build. If I can swap out everything else on your armor and all your mods and accomplish the exact same thing, or if I even get rid of all your armor and get rid of your exotics, and if the weapons by themselves are doing the same thing, is that a build at the end of the day? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So I get what you're saying. I understand everything you're saying. But for someone to, I feel like when you say it's not a build, yes, in like how you're saying it, things are replaceable and interchangeable. But if somebody was looking for something specific, something built around something, it might be more a little bit vague. But like if somebody was like, say they searched up solar sunshot build or something, that's like the main purpose of that build that I went over. The sunshot or just a solar build that are using incandescent weapons or something like that. Like the two weapons I showed you was the Callus Mini Tool and the sunshot. If somebody looked one of those two things up, I have it as a tag. If somebody looked one of those things up with a solar build, then they're gonna come across my video. And I don't like most of the exotics for Hunter, like I think there's like shards of Galanor, and then there's the trip mine ones. You could switch that out with that. That's why it's not a Star Eater scale build. It's more focused around like the solar perks and using the solar weapons with the synergy with the subclass. You know what I mean? And I feel like when somebody specifically looks that up, they're gonna find that video that more focuses into that, regardless of whatever the exotic armor piece that I use, because it's not really like that's like I said, that's not its main purpose to do that. The main purpose is to use solar weapons with incandescent with like recharging your abilities faster, applying scorch to things. Like I said, that's the main purpose. So if somebody was looking for something around that, like that would be something for them. Because I feel like builds can still build around whatever the weapon it's using, and there's no I could have used Lucky Pants or something like that that would enhance that. Yes, that would have been better. Like honestly, that probably is better. But I mean, it still doesn't make this any less of a build because it's still focusing on the weapons. But like you said, I didn't use it to its full potential. But like I said, just because I didn't use it to its full potential doesn't mean that it's not a build. Because like you said, go way back to the jack of all trades thing. I wasn't going for like a full 100% focus on that, or else I would have done the Lucky Pants build that everybody else made. You know what I mean? And I would have just focused on the Sunshot. I wouldn't have focused on the Catalyst Mini Tool. But to be able to use the Catalyst Mini Tool too, then that changes it. Then you wouldn't use Lucky Pants, so you're sort of like free range. There's nothing for buffing SMGs or anything. You could have used Shards of Gallon, or like if we're just going by like building around exotics to do certain things, yes, it becomes very strict, but I wasn't building around the starter scales. And I feel like when you build around like a subclass and the weapons, yes, things do become very interchangeable. But if you want to go ahead and say that you can't build around a weapon or weapon types and say like, oh, this is a solar weapon build, like I don't know, there's so many different categories of builds that you can do that like certain ones are going to have restrictions and some of them are going to be very interchangeable, but like that's the flexibility.
Let me ask this question while you explain that then. So that be the case, what will the difference between what you were saying your build was versus just a weapon or a subclass keyword showcase be?
Wait, can you rephrase that? I didn't really understand the way you put that.
Like, okay, so we know for like stuff like volatile rounds for Scorch, for like Jolt, all those kind of things. Those are called those are keywords for the subclasses. So that's subclass keywords. So what would be the difference between just like a showcase of what subclass keywords are, or in this case, what would be the difference between just a weapon showcase, in this case, a Sunshot and what it can do, versus a build? Like, wouldn't that, instead of being a build, just be, hey, this is a weapon showcase, and here are some of the keywords that interact with that? Wouldn't that be more of a weapon showcase then, versus a full build showcase?
Well, I don't necessarily think that, because the weapon is also working with the subclass. So if people don't have the right aspects or fragments,
yeah,
it's
that's
not
what I was
like
saying, a weapon and a keyword showcase versus a full build. You can still do just a showcase saying, hey, this is this weapon, and here are some subclasses that work out for it. Like, for example, I could take my Rotocrota and say, hey, this Rotocrota's got repulsor brace and destabilizing rounds. Here is a subclass you work best with. That sounds like it's more of a weapon showcase versus just a full build.
I still don't, because you're making something, so it's technically it's still not just, can't just say a weapon showcase, because you're putting shit together. Like if you see people using shit in fucking Crucible or something like that, and they're using a specific weapon because they're testing it out for the first time, they're gonna run certain things to enhance that, or they could just run something else so they still get their, like, say somebody uses starter scales just to get their super back faster in there, and they were using Callus Mini Tool, like a legendary weapon, and they were focusing on that, and then they would build their subclass around the weapon too, so it'd just be like a whole mix together. But somebody would still put that out and be like, oh, putting this together makes this weapon good while still having like your super back pretty fast, because you're still spawning a ton of orbs with the build that I put out. It's not like it's disregarding that fact, and you can still recharge your super really fast and get your super and get that Feast of Light. But it didn't completely disregard the fact that it's starters on. It's not like I didn't put any mods on that didn't give me orbs of power. I do have a ton of those. You do spawn a ton of orbs with it. But I also was doing something else, so being able to do multiple things doesn't take away from the fact that it's still a build. Like, even though it's focusing around one thing more, because I feel like a build is still someone putting a bunch of things together to do a certain thing, regardless of whether that's interchangeable. Yeah, there's different subclasses that have weapons that do those same things, but in a different way. But like putting certain things together and showing someone it is you building something to show somebody else. It's still considered a build. Like you built it, you put it together, because somebody else might do something else and change an aspect or change a fragment, and that still changes what it is. They put it together in a different way and built that thing their own way. You know what I mean? Because if we just went by doing like one certain specific thing, I feel like there would only be like one build per exotic in the game, just focusing on whatever the exotic's main purpose is and creating that efficiency. And by saying that, every exotic only has one build, and I'm sure as hell that's not the case, because if you go on YouTube, there's multiple different builds for the same exotic. Even using just the same weapon, they might have something changed in their aspects or fragments, but it's still different. It's a different build that somebody else changed some things and put it together so it works even just slightly different, but it's still a build. And like you could go on there and look up, like, I don't even know, like there's some subclasses that restrict it, and you can very much only do, like, I think Hunter Arc subclass, like that is, I feel like that subclass is very restricted to literally punching shit, like, and only a few exotics work with that. But like most of the time you're going to run like a very similar subclass build, like the aspects and the fragments are going to be very similar, but you can interchange the exotics, whether you want to do invisibility, like you're really doing the same thing every time, just changing the exotic, but it's still a build because you're using that exotic for its purpose, but its all other purpose is whatever the subclass, like whatever the aspects and fragments are in that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I get what you're saying, but there is one part that I would have to disagree on. And again, I want to make sure, in case everyone gets the wrong idea, I'm not trying to convince you that what you're saying is wrong, what I'm saying is right, or anything like that.
Yeah, I
It's
get
just
it.
merely us talking, so I don't want anyone saying that, hey, you don't mean a dick or anything.
Mutual disagreement.
Mutual, exactly. I'm not trying to convince you or anything. This is just my 2 cents, vice versa. But there is one thing you did say that I would disagree with, and that is about exotics only having one use. For the vast majority of exotics, most of them do only have one use. Now, there are some situations where they've come out and they've had, like, hidden uses. Like, for example, Gear Falcons, when it first came out, the volatile rounds buff was not on there. It just made you invisible. We found out later on that it made you volatile, and they'd eventually add that on. That's a situation where they just didn't tell us what it did. But for the most part, most exotics that aren't neutral, now there are neutral exotics, and those are where you get Kratos. Most of the class-based exotics are very specific. For example, I'm not going to take a Gear Falcons and put that on, a Stellar subclass. I mean, it's meant for a very specific thing. Something like
Right.
Raiju's Harness, it's meant for a very specific thing. Lucky Raspberry, same thing. Now, when we start getting into something like Radiant Dance Machine, Star Eater Scales, stuff like that, the Bombardiers, stuff like that, that's neutral, those, yes, those are going to have a bit more flexibility because those are meant for not necessarily a specific subclass, but most exotics, I would have to disagree with you, they do have a very specific thing that they do because they alter the way the game plays for a specific way. For example, the Renewal Grass, of course, they make your Dust Field Grenades, and I'm on my exotic page now, so I got examples. They make your Dust Field Grenades, bigger. That's what they do, and they buff damage. Calibrant's Hand, which is the stellar build that I have, it makes your proximity knives increase quicker until it explodes, obviously. It's one that's got a very specific build for it, and there's not too many ways to get around that. Mask of Bacchus, again, it replaces your dodge with basically a shift or a blink, and there's no real wiggle room with that. That's what it does. Now, it may have some sub-effects, and that's where some different builds kind of fall into, but for the most part, most exotics are for specific subclasses. Now, the ones that are neutral, that's where things get a bit weirder, and that's where you see a lot of different build diversity come into, is using those. Now, how they change up is when you start getting exotic weapons into, and it's those exotic weapons combined with exotic armor, and you start seeing builds come into. Or, for example, exotic armor and different weapon perks that you start seeing. For example, Gear Falcons, that's one of my favorite exotics, that and Omnioculus Hunter. So those are really good examples of different build things. But using Gear Falcons and using, again, my Word of Crota with Repulsor Brace and Destabilizing Rounds. Destabilizing Rounds can, by itself, turn you invisible, proccing your chest piece without having to go into your dodge or turn invisible a different way. The sword I actually use for my Gear Falcon is the Heart Shadow, my favorite sword in the game. That's the one that turns you invisible without having to use your dodge for Gear Falcons. That specifically an exotic or a legendary perk playing along with an exotic chess piece in a very specific way. Now, again, you said, and we're giving you can have builds that are more jack of all trade builds, okay, good to go, but then they typically would still play with that exotic stuff somehow. So, and this is, again, the part where I don't want to say it in a way that comes off crappy, but I guess the build itself just could have been optimized a lot better, even with, and I understand, again, new players, they don't have nearly the amount of stuff that we do. It's, players can't necessarily go through and do legendary lock sectors solo. That is a very hard thing to get into when you're a new player. You're not going to have the exotics, so if you only got what you got, that's what you got. I don't know what getting mods is like nowadays. I mean, I've got all the mods in the game, but I've been playing since Destiny 2 came out. I don't know how mods come about nowadays, but they still drop from like lost sectors like they used to back in the day, or strikes, or how that happens anymore. So players may not have the mods that we do, and that mod system's gone through a lot of changes. So depending on what you've got, obviously you're kind of going to be restricted to what you have access to. I'm by no means trying to disparage anybody, saying, hey, if you don't have this, you suck or anything. But I guess it's more of a situation to where the build itself, and I don't want this to come off as or try to be a Smith or anything, or come off like a dick, because I really don't, because everybody starts somewhere and everybody learns, and people don't necessarily play as much as I do, and I don't even play that much. But I guess it came more off of the build itself, and I'll call what you said the build. It came more off of it wasn't optimized or not very good, but not necessarily in a way that we're saying it's a dick. Like it didn't. I get that it's a jack of all trades thing, but it also didn't really take advantage of what you had there in a way that, again, may not be obvious to somebody else, but to other players it was like, this doesn't really look more like a build, or you weren't really playing to what it could do as well as it could. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so like I wanted to go back and say and cover over the thing you said about like stuff being interchangeable, and how you said like things could be swapped out. Like starter scales, you could use anything. And but the other thing I wanted to look at was you talking about fuck, what was the other thing? I'm blanking.
Legendary perks or exotic weapons?
No, it was like one of the last things you said. Oh, you were talking about it being optimized.
Right,
I feel like that's more the direction you're trying to go for, not necessarily that it's not a build, because I feel like, well, how I'm explaining it's still a build. Like I said before, it's not optimized. Yes, I agree. It's not optimized for one singular purpose. But that's what makes it a jack of all trades build. If somebody were to make a Star Eaters build, that would be a completely separate build focused on just doing like high DPS or getting your super back fast as fuck with the starter scales equipped. But where I was going for is that was my purpose, for it to be a jack of all trades build, to be something that can do a little bit of everything. Like that was my purpose in showing people.
And
like,
I'll admit this too. What you say, I don't want to lose this particular side. I don't want to interrupt with this part. That may be what you're trying to do. It may not have come across that way, because had you said that a different way, or kind of said, hey, this is just a jack of all trade builds, probably wouldn't have had the reaction I did had I heard that, if that makes sense.
Yes, like maybe I didn't state it, but I did state somewhere in the video that the build allowed you to have ad clear. I did state, I can't remember what part. I don't know if it was the mods section or if it was in the very beginning or something. I did state that the build was good at doing ad clear, DPS, and survivability. I might have even put that in the description. But I did state that that's what the build was good for, doing all three of those things. And I didn't state that this was like I don't know if you watch like build crafters like Mactix or Plunder the Booty. I don't know what all the big names are for people that build stuff, but like people like that will put on their post like, oh, 1,000 million damage to represent that the build's gonna get you a shit ton of damage, or like 100 supers in less than a minute, like when they put it on their thumbnail or something like that. I didn't put that. I just put it'll make you unstoppable. It's a very vague statement, but I did state in there, I might have not said jack of all trades specifically, but I did state that it was good at doing a little bit of everything. You know what I mean? So it's not like I was misconceiving everybody by not saying, oh, it's a jack of all trades there, and I was saying, oh yeah, this build does like the best DPS that you can do, or this build is the best ad clear you can do, or this build will keep you alive 24/7. I said it could do all those things, so I wasn't like trying to put someone in a path where they put this build on and they think they're gonna do like the best damage or have their super back a bunch of times. Because I know that there's a solar build with Star Eater scales, or if you use I think it's Marksman Gunslinger, or maybe it might be Deadshot, one of the two, where you do the Radiant Dodge and then everybody gets their Star Eater scales or their super back already, and the Feast of Light is already back up, so you basically have like super back over and over again. Like that would be a build focusing into Star Eaters and just everybody doing that over and over again, so everybody gets their super back and is having Time Source Feast of Light and just pretty much only using their super. But like how I stated it that it can do all three of those things, and that was what I was going for, you know what I mean? And I'm almost 100% certain, I'd have to go back and look, I'm almost 100% certain I stated that in the description and said it somewhere in the video.
No, you did, and I think it just came across, the way you said it wouldn't, you did say that, but it didn't come across as a jack of all trades build. The way you said it kind of was like, with this, and this, it does this, and it did kind of come across as, okay, it kind of does all this, but it's more like, and I guess it's more like when you hear that, you don't necessarily think this is a jack of all trades build. You think, okay, it can do this, but then what? Like, for example, like I could go through and say the combination of my Gear Falcons and my destabilizing round can do this, and I can take out this kind of stuff and this, and you'll be able to do this, but it's still as an overarching theme versus, again, had you said jack of all trades build, just flat out, hey, this is a jack of all trades build, use it for anything at this level of content, you'd be good to go. You did say it can do this, and this, but it still didn't quite come across that way. I think that's why multiple people kind of had that. And again, I haven't bound back to the video in a while. It might just be us two that said something, but I think that's why we both were kind of like, it seems more like a loadout than a build, and it could just be the presentation. That might be what it comes down to, is just how it was presented. Now, there were some questions about the building. You talked to me in Discord about it. I think the other guy kind of had some stuff about stats in there. I kind of asked you about it too, because I'm looking at you right now. It looks like you got the build on right now. And I think in the video I saw like there were some mods that could be equipped and you had room for them and you hadn't. You explained to me already why it wasn't. And that's because you were waiting to get some stuff boosted up, and that would put you there. So that was one thing that was there. But
I will say that I am only a returning player. I've been playing for like a month and a half since I did come back. And I know that a ton of people take breaks from Destiny. I wasn't always one of those people. I don't have the most friends on Destiny. A lot of my friends are very opposed to playing this game. I do have a group of people that I play with, but like with work and playing and streaming and trying to do certain things, like especially just coming back, trying to do raids and like focusing on getting all the exotics I need, and I don't play on my other two characters. So if I go to make a build on there, am I gonna have to wait a month till I get everything that I need to perfect some build?
No, trust me. I got a whole clan of people that have family, so believe me, I understand. And I quit playing after Curse of Osiris. I didn't come back into Shadowkeep, so I definitely understand that part. So I'm by no means saying, and that's one thing I want to make sure, I'm by no means saying your stats aren't perfect, so you're doing bad. No, I was curious about one portion of it. That's why I didn't ask about you, because I saw your Star Raiders at like level 9, but you had room to put another mod on there to, max out that particular stat. But you explained to me again why you had, and I can see you probably just wouldn't do that. Good to go. I didn't know if you even got alloys or anything like that, so I didn't want to go up.
I guess I had something in my head planned, but I think, I don't know if it was you or if it was someone else that's saying like, you shouldn't make a build video. I think it was the other person. You shouldn't make a build video until you get the materials and upgrade everything to max. But I just didn't really think that was necessary, because you get the idea. I mean, they're 98 and 99, and I don't have something masterwork, which is going to give me the last 1 and 2 that I need. Like, where I'm going, you know what I mean? And,
and that is the shitty side of the internet too, because I'm not going to lie, that's one of the first things I saw too. I get where you're coming from, and that's not necessarily a good reaction to have, but it does stand out, I should say, when you're making a build video and somebody does see that. Because again, it's not necessarily that the build video was bad. I mean, I like how you presented everything. There was a little confusion over what kind of build it was, which is why we're talking now. But that it is something that does stand out, especially when people are trying to learn what it is you're putting out there, learn what the build is. That stands out very quickly when you come across, you're like, oh, wait, that's 98, 99. What's going on here? So again, I'm not saying the information you put out there was bad, but it does draw attention to that.
Yeah, I understand. Because, I mean, I think if I know there's some people. I mean, it depends on whatever armor you have and what stats you got ruled on. If you had artifice armor, or if you had seasonal stat focused armor or something like that. If you have like that, you might have just one singular 100. Some people have double hundreds. Some people are able to do triple hundreds. But I think when somebody doesn't see 100 like stat, like yeah, they start to question like, what the hell, the build's fucked up. But if I had 100 stat and I was trying to go for like double hundreds and I could do it, I just didn't have the energy for it. People probably wouldn't question that as much. And but I feel like the basis of this conversation is that one, I think it's three different things. One, I don't think it's not considered a build. It's still a build. Didn't I didn't present it the way I probably should have, or I didn't present it enough. Maybe I should have done like, instead of putting this build is unstoppable in the thumbnail, I should have done this build lets you do everything or some shit like that. And then on your point, I understand where you're coming from. Yes, I didn't optimize it for like the exotic armor that I had on, or I guess the weapon or something. I do agree with that, but
well,
I feel
when
like
you say optimized, because that is me just being when I'm looking at it, because I immediately started thinking of what I would do with the build. That's just me. So the optimizing, I wouldn't even worry about that. That's just something I happen to notice after the thing where I was like, okay, it doesn't really seem like a build, but again, it's jack of all trade build. So understandable now. The optimizing is later because technically speaking, I mean, there's debate even now over what certain stats are optimized and what perks are optimized over other mods. So that part, I will withdraw. I will give you that one. That optimizing, there's a lot of debate over that. Now, there were some things if you're going to play into one aspect or another, but again, you already mentioned that's not what your build was trying to do. You weren't trying to play over one thing over another. It was supposed to be a jack of all trades build, which, again, had I understood that better, I probably wouldn't have said anything.
yeah, because I know in like you said, things are interchangeable, especially in a jack of all trades build. Like you can, like there's going to be different ones for every subclass. You could like it might be considered a loadout, but like certain aspects and certain subclasses are going to spawn orbs for you for doing certain things. Like I could have had this focused on doing ignitions instead of whatever I had on now, and having the ignitions spawn orbs, and that would be even more orbs for my star eater scales. And I could have still had, because I think you could put like 5 fragments on Solar Hunter. So I mean, like you could have had those ignition things and still had like the powered melee makes you radiant, and you could have had your solar weapon still giving you that restoration, but it's different because the ad clear is more focused on ignition, so that could be like a different solar jack of all trades build. And then obviously with other subclasses, there's going to be certain things where I know in Void, if you do melee damage, you can get your grenade back faster. So people might not know the different like combinations of things you could do to make like those jack of all trades build or builds that can do anything. And like I said, maybe somebody that's more experienced, that might be something that they just like, oh, everybody should know that or something like that. But the people that are either returning or haven't even touched like the 3.0s or aren't new to that or just new to the game in general, they might not know that. So yeah, this build might not be for the people that are like just doing endgame content and all that kind of stuff. And I can agree with you on that. Like most people that are experienced with the game might not look for that, but like they might want to use it just for the fucks of it, just for fun. Because I mean, I'm sure Destiny 2 has gotten stale for a shit ton of people at times, and like I said before about making builds around shitty exotics that no one wants to see. Some people do want to see that. Some people want to try something different. Maybe somebody wants to use a glaive. They want to use Triton Vice. Yeah, it might not be used for like the end game and hard content, or you might not take it into a raid. Like I think I was doing when I made the Triton Vice build, I was doing the mission that you do, the Excalibur mission, and somebody saw me using that and said I will never run anything with you while you're using that. But it was still really fun because I got to use a glaive, and I got an overshield almost every time I got a melee kill. It was recharging my grenade, so I was weakening targets every time I got a melee kill. I was going invisible. Like it was fun to use, and it was working for that mission, that harder mission. But like, yeah, if you're gonna go into a raid or a GM, you're not gonna take that in there. You're gonna use something that's more optimized for whatever that GM needs. You know what I mean? I know certain GMs are like Light Blade. I know a lot of people like to run Invis Hunter on that, so you're gonna go specifically for something that makes you Invis all the time. But maybe having something that allows you to go Invis and do a fuck ton of damage with a certain exotic. For example, Gerfalcons. You could use Omnioculus, but that's just gonna make you invisible a bunch. There might not be a lot of stuff that's buffing your damage. But with Gerfalcons, you could be going invisible and doing better void damage at the same time. Because I feel like Gerfalcons might be another exotic that you could make like a jack of all trades build out of it, but you could also just like solely focus on the invisibility as well. You know what I mean?
Do you do any Grandmasters at all?
I do. I have Conqueror. I got it this season, but I do Grandmasters. I'm not like completely familiar with all Grandmasters. Like I haven't done them all. I honestly probably could tell you that I've never completed a Light Blade before.
Well, you said something funny earlier that someone made a comment when you were running Triton saying they would never run some with you. I ran with a guy not last night but the night before. We did the Mars Battleground, Heist Battleground, which is notoriously one of the hardest ones to do. And this guy was rocking a glaive and a shotgun and a lament. So all up close range, it shocked me. But yeah, I would like comments like that. Like I would never run you because you're running this. Stuff like that, I want to make sure I'm not trying to come off like I'm saying that or anything like that, because I've seen some people surprise me. This guy was rocking a glaive for a Grandmaster, and he was a hunter running it, and he did great on Arc subclass. Now, when it comes to stuff like Omnioculus versus Guild Falcons, I made a whole video about that when I probably disagree with you on their uses. I'd have them reverse, but that's more of just like a build crafting for a very specific. So like that's one where we would have to get into where it'd be very specific. This is what works in this and what's more. It would definitely be more of an optimized video, because for something like that, Omnioculus, I mean, hands down, would be better for Grandmaster than Gear Pockets, just because of what happens in Grandmasters. You can't really rely on kills so much more. Anything relying on needing to get kills is not as reliable as something like Omni, where you can just get it right then and go. Utility in Grandmasters is usually 9 times out of 10 is going to be more useful than damage stuff. Damage will usually come, but utility is always useful.
Yeah, so I'm not as familiar with like how I know they changed some stuff with like Grandmasters and stuff. Like I know that before, I think it used to be like could you never make it to the power level that Grandmaster was, or was it just like was it always just like a higher power level than what the max power cap was for that season?
So what they did, it's always 25. What they did was that now we don't have to level up in between seasons, which is nice. What they did was that when you enter a Grandmaster, they just make your power level 25 below no matter what you're at. So I think, I'm not sure, as long as you're at power for the season, the soft cap, you should be good. It's just no matter how strong you are, your power level will be 25 below that Grandmaster level. So you're basically, no matter what, you're always going in at 18 or an 1840, and they're capping you 25 below that. So that's what's going on with Grandmaster now. What they basically did was make you not have to level up in between seasons. For Grandmasters, very, very little changed overall.
Okay, so, but back to you saying about Omnioculus being like the more beneficial exotic, or having a build with Omnioculus would be more beneficial than Gerfalcons, because certain things like you're gonna want that invisibility because you're using it off your abilities, not kills. But for people that maybe want to like switch it up or something like that, like if say you're somebody that does GM helps or some shit like that, or you just play them for fun, like for somebody that does that all the time, I mean, I can't speak for everybody. I'm not everybody, but if I was somebody that did that all the time and ran the same build for each subclass, or like ran one build for each subclass, like I would get bored of that. Like I'd get very bored. And using stuff like maybe what I put out, or maybe somebody that ran a Gerfalcons, or if I put out a Gerfalcons video that was like a jack of all trades thing, or something focused on the Gerfalcons, even though it's not the most optimal, yeah, that's the word. Even though it's not the most optimal for doing that specific activity, it still can be used, and it can work. Like you said, that dude was using a glaive with Arc subclass. I don't know what he could have possibly been doing, but him doing that, it worked. So, I mean, he put together something that worked, or he found something that worked, and that is still technically a build, because, like, not anybody can just throw on a glaive and throw on whatever else he had and then throw on lament and just be like, yep, I'm going into a Grandmaster. You have to have certain things on, probably, like a certain subclass or certain mods to make that whole thing work, and that's somebody building something for that purpose of using that glaive and meleeing or whatever the hell it is, a melee build or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. That'd be an example of a build that had a more specific purpose versus one that's more of a jack of all trades. And again,
Yeah,
I'm advocating what you put out was a build. It was just
yeah,
misunderstanding as to what its purpose was supposed to be. So I'm advocating that you
oh,
got
yeah,
that. I'm just at this point, I think we're just talking more build philosophy. But yeah, I mean that would definitely be one to where he put that together with a purpose, and that purpose was to do grandmasters. Now, like I said,
yeah,
I put out a video here right before I saw yours, and I think that's why you popped up on my feed. I mean, if we're talking about, technically speaking, and this is what I kind of put this out in my video a couple times. Technically speaking, if you have the skill, you can use anything in a Grandmaster. Now, the
yeah.
build itself is going to determine how much easier you can get through that. So yeah, technically speaking, you can go through with Gear Falcons for a Grandmaster. That's going to be a lot more optimized for lower or mid-tier stuff than it is going to be high-tier stuff.
Right.
Because for one, you're not going to, well, again, for Grandmasters, you want something that doesn't really rely on kills. So again, yeah, you can use Gear Falcons, but if you can't get that kill, now you basically have a useless exotic on you until you can get a kill. Omni, instead, you can use whenever. Now again, can use Gear Falcons? Yeah, if you don't have Omni or anything else, use whatever. And if you've got the skill, go ahead and use it. But if you're trying to make it easier on yourself, Omni would be the way to go. Now, for lower tier content, you don't really want to use Omni because you don't need to turn invisible then. You can, but it's a lot quicker to just kill an enemy in one shot versus turning invisible and then killing the enemy. You can just kill the enemy and turn invisible at the same time because you can do that with Gear Falcons. But you can't do that in the Grandmaster. You can't just farm kills like that. You can't reliably proc that utility when you want it to. Now, there's plenty of other stuff that can just damage, like Falling Star Curse or whatever that's called. I think Curse of Falling Star for Titan. That thing is so strong that if you take that into a Grandmaster, I'm not even going to blink an eye because that can one-shot champions. I mean, that's one to where the damage itself, technically speaking, it's good for everything, but it's so damaging that, yeah, you would definitely take that one into Grandmaster, no problem. Stuff like, it doesn't feel like there's like, the philosophy is like for lower tier stuff, you want damage. For higher tier stuff, you want to build for utility. That's the basic philosophy that I go off on. So I say used to. I still play Warframe. I don't know if you ever played Warframe or not. Have you?
I play a little bit. I'm not I know some people that really play that. I'm not too keen on it.
Gotcha. So in Warframe, they have endless missions. They're called they have survival missions and like defense missions, and you can basically play them for as long as you want. There are people that do like 9, 10, 12-hour marathons of it, and the higher and more waves you do, the harder it gets. You take more damage, your enemies have more health, and they have more armor. Well, you can make a Warframe build for damage where you can, wipe out an entire room and do, 1,000 damage and destroy everything and push every button. Okay, makes sense. That's going to eventually peter out, though. You can only build for damage so much, but when enemies keep scaling, you can only build for so much damage. When you get to the point to where your skills, the damage no longer wipes out that room, or your damage skills are no longer, taking care of it, well, you're eventually going to die because your damage can't out-damage their health. But utility, on the other hand, is always going to be useful. So even though I can't wipe out a room with a press of a button if I turn invisible, yet utility is going to be more important in higher end activities versus damage. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I completely agree with you on that. Like, yeah, when I get what you're saying, higher end content, when you're not able to get those kills or the damage not going to really matter, you're going to want stuff that's going to make you invisible or like you were saying, more vague, but like stuff that's going to proc your abilities or whatever you're trying to go for without the use of having to kill something or deal damage to something. You want something that can just be done just like that.
Yeah, like invisibility or like suspending, for example, stopping an enemy from attacking you with suspended with strand. Using freeze grenades to freeze enemies, stuff like that would be great examples of utility that would stop damage coming at you. Versus, just using a throwing knife with, say, your proximity knife on a hunter, it's not going to one-shot enemies like it would at lower levels, so there's no real point in using it. You want something that would be a bit more utility, like, for example, with that same subclass, Restoration would be infinitely more useful than a grenade that's not going to kill an enemy and reproc itself. Restoration, however, would heal you, that utility versus damage. But at lower levels, you don't need as much utility because you can just take out everything with, in like one shot. So stuff that will damage quicker or stuff that's going to proc off of damage would be more useful than versus, trying to get yourself restoration times 2 and then go attack a bunch of enemies. There's no point in that. Just go attack the enemies. They're all thrall. You can kill them in one hit and, a raid or like a story mission. But in like higher and stuff, okay, yeah, you want to go ahead and get your restoration up or get your invisibility, and then you go try to take that stuff on because you have to survive. You need the extra survivability.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. It's basically like you don't want to be using stuff that is requiring another thing to proc that. You want stuff that can happen just like that without needing or relying on something else to make that thing happen. And I get that. Like in a raid, like you could most raids now, if you're doing like a 1600 raid, like you can probably use whatever. But like for people that maybe have never done it before, or I don't know, people that don't know as much about the game, like I think I wasn't really big on King's Fall when I played D1.
Mm-hmm.
I've been a very choppy player. I'm not like I haven't always been consistently like with the game and played like every last thing. I've done Wrath, I've done Crota, I've done Vogue, but like I only did them very few times as D1 because I was very young at that time. So I didn't know what the fuck I was doing, but I did it for fun and I learned the stuff. The King's Fall I think I did it maybe once, and I honestly have no clue about like what most of the encounters were. I could remember very small bits and pieces. But going into that, he was talking, this is actually one of my viewers, the one that said that thing about the glaive, not going in there. He's one of my viewers. I play with him from time to time, and he always tells me what the most optimal shit is, but I don't always listen to him. I listen to him sometimes and like sort of use what he says to help better me if I'm struggling, but like he also just lets me play how I play, sort of thing. And I feel like that, like you said, like for people that are looking for the most optimal stuff, they're gonna go for stuff like what you said. Like if you're going into a GM, use Omnioculus, or if you're going into something that's lower, like you're not gonna really need that. It's not gonna benefit you that much. You could use something else that is gonna benefit you more because you're able to do that certain thing, like get a kill to proc your invisibility and do that extra damage, which it's giving you that extra perk. But I feel like whenever you get into everybody that plays Destiny, for the people that are looking, there's people that are looking for that most optimal stuff, and there's also people that are looking for shit that's just fun but still works. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I feel like there's just like two different groups of people, and certain builds are gonna be for certain people, and that just goes with anything that anybody looks up for Destiny. Like there's going to be builds for certain people. It just really depends on what the person searches up and what specifically they're looking for. And like you said, I know you and I both came to a conclusion on not disregarding that it's not a build, and we came to that. And like you said, we're more on like the optimal side, and what to use certain things for. And I 100% agree with you on everything that you said about using certain things in there. And then I guess I'm not opposing or anything. I'm just saying, putting it out there as I pretty much already did, but saying that like it just depends on what people are looking for. Fun, or are you trying to get the shit done? But like obviously, even if you're making it for fun, you still want to make it work in some sort of way. Like you can't just throw a bunch of shit together, like throwing a solar weapon with a void subclass using something that like using Raju's harness. Like that shit's not gonna, that shit literally has nothing to do with each other almost at all. Like that would be something, but a new player, they might not know that. Like they might be like, oh, I'm just gonna put on this weapon because it looks cool, and then but then when they look up a build video and see that stuff synergizes, that might kickstart them off to using that build, and they get comfortable with that shit, and they're like, oh, okay, maybe I'll look for something that does higher damage, and they go into a GM and they're like, okay, maybe damage isn't what I need, so they'll go back on YouTube and find another build. But I doubt that they're gonna throw away old builds if they had fun with them. You know what I mean? If that was a build that they had fun with and it worked for certain missions, maybe they're gonna go back and do strikes with it because it still works in a strike, or run like a dungeon or some shit with it because it still works in a dungeon, and
maybe
use that build in there.
Depending on the build, maybe if it actually works, synergizes.
Yeah, like I said.
Well, and there's
Like I said, yeah, it has to work still. If it doesn't, if it's something stupid, then yeah, you're not gonna go back and use it, or it'd be stupid to use it if you're dying over and over again. But if it works and it was fun, but it wasn't optimal for something else, then you could go back and use it in something else. Like you said, like go back and use Gerfalcon instead of Omnioculus if you're going to do like a 1600 raid or something like that.
Well, there's a quote from a YouTuber I watch. His name is Life of Rio, and he used to be a big Warframe player. And he's one of those players that did like the endless grind. So you do like 9-hour stuff solo, which is, I don't have the patience to do.
Holy
Like,
shit.
how would you take a piss break doing that kind of thing? But
Yeah,
the
fuck
skill and patience it does for something like that is crazy. But there for a while, you kind of got burnt out and you stopped doing endless content. Because the way the game worked at the time is if you're doing different waves of content, if there was 3 people or 4 people per team, and when you were going for stuff, and if somebody wanted to quit, it was basically all or nothing. So people were kind of getting pissed off because he wanted to keep going. He was doing like LFG stuff, like random stuff. They'd want to leave, and he'd be there trying to do stuff for 9 hours, but the people with him, didn't want to. So he finally got burnt out, and he started doing this stuff like 20 waves and quitting, 20 waves and quitting. And he came up with a quote, and that was, at 20 waves and lower, everything works. Every build works at 20 waves or lower. Because he was building for in-game stuff. So he was kind of seeing like all these builds that were coming out for stuff. He's like, well, this doesn't work, or this can't work. Well, he's doing the beginner, or again, not beginner stuff. He was doing like the lesser wave stuff or the at-level stuff. He's like, well, it does work because it's at level. It makes sense. But when you get to higher level stuff, the philosophy behind what you're building changes. So that might also be part of what kind of biased me when I was looking at the video too, is that a lot of what I do, and again, this is just what you typically see in the community. Again, what you put out there is not a bad at all, but I think that's also part of it too. Is that typically when you're looking at or when you're seeing builds in the community, you are seeing stuff that's going to survive in the higher tier content. You don't see like a lot of lower. When I say lower tier, I don't mean like as in lower quality. You don't see like a lot of lower tier stuff built for like, story missions or regular strikes or just for like ad clear or that kind of thing. You don't see a whole lot of that. You'll see it for like individual weapons or weapon builds or weapon showcases, but you don't typically see a lot of just all out builds for that. So I think that also might be part of what kind of threw that off as well. Typically you do see, like you said, you'll see in-game builds for like, for raids or for like grandmasters, that kind of thing. You'll see full-on synergized builds that work for specific things, that do a specific thing and help out your team in a specific way. And that's what you'll typically see. So there's also not a lot of builds out there for like just, lower tier content or just ad clearing content or just super, like, even when you see builds that are like fun builds, they're still doing like pretty insane things. Sorry, I got the hiccups. They're doing pretty insane things as far as how the synergy's working with them. So you don't typically see just kind of your starter, hey, average, this is how this works, this is a basic build type thing, if that makes sense. So then also
I get what you're saying. Like, I know like Banner or War right now, if it's still fucking stupid. Like, a lot of people use Banner or War. It's probably fun as fuck for them. I don't really play Titan at all, so I don't really know. But for somebody using that might be really fucking fun with them, and there could be builds around something that's really fucking fun that's also used in fucking endgame content. Like I said, I don't know. I just gave an example based on what I heard. I don't use Titan. At least not yet. I don't really play on my other characters as much.
I've got an in-game Banner War builder on my Titan. I've got one. It's a sword build, and you literally take no damage when you're using it, or you take so little damage that you can tank anything in the game. So yeah, there is in-game builds for it.
Yeah, but somebody might find that fun as well as it being an end game build. But for example, like my Triton Vice build, you're not gonna take that into end game. Like, I mean, somebody might, you could, but you probably shouldn't. Most people would be like, no, don't use a glaive. If you went into a group of people, if you found an LFG and they saw you running a fucking glaive, they might be like, what the fuck are you running? Because I remember back in the day, whenever like there wasn't like the abilities and shit to do the different champ stuns. Now they have like arc jolt effects do overload, or arc blind effects do unstoppable, or volatile rounds are barrier. So you were very restricted to like what weapons you were using and what the mods were for that. But now with that, like, you could be like, it's a lot easier. For example, my Train Vice build, you could be using that glaive because you can take up that slot, and instead of using something that did what even is I forget what it was, but volatile
rounds, you got jolt,
suppression. Like, you could be running suppression grenades or some shit, and that could be your overload instead of running an overload weapon or something like that. And then you could have like a barrier weapon on, and then I don't know, some else that's doing because I know most of them do two. Then you'd have volatile rounds for a barrier, so maybe you put on an unstoppable weapon instead. Then you could run that. But back then it was very restricted to like, you have to have one of each weapon on, or two of each, or some shit like that. I don't know. Then you'd have like one seasonal mod that like, oh, your grenades done on stops or some shit like that, something like that, and you'd be very restricted to what subclass you are now. But I feel like now with all those stuns and stuff going into like nightfalls and GMs or whatever, like there's a lot more flexibility, and they're able to make more builds on that now.
Yeah.
Because it also, like I said, it also depends on the seasonal mods, like the state of the game, like where it's at, if something's good or not, like if you're able to recharge it really fast, or if certain grenades are just dealing or stunning on stops or stunning a champion. But I feel like there's a lot more like free space now than there was, and like yeah, there's gonna be. I feel like there's like tiers of, like you said, there's different tiers of difficulty in the game. Like certain activities in the game are gonna be harder, and some certain activities are gonna be like mediocre, and some of them are gonna be really fucking easy. Like if you're doing like the easy campaign, like you literally could fucking probably run all the beginning gear at 1600. I don't know. But like you're not gonna take that into a dungeon probably, because one, you're not gonna fucking do any damage at all, and if there's multiple people that are doing shit like that, then you're not gonna get anywhere like at all. So then there comes those like mediocre to average builds, and that might be like fun for someone to use, like a newcomer or something, like I stated multiple times before. But you're not going to want to use like just all legendary items and shit like that. You're going to want something to help you out in some way, whether that be multiple ways or just one. Especially as someone who's like average at the game and doesn't really know much. But like you said, once you get into the harder content, the shit really does get like specific, and like you come down to all those like fine details and shit, and like then you have those people that are building like specifically for those activities and shit. Because I feel like raids nowadays, yeah, raids and dungeons, you legit could use whatever, but I feel like there's a lot of builds that are just gonna help you in certain ways depending on the encounter, or whatever you're doing in the raid. I don't know, depending on whatever raid you do.
Yeah, raids I'd probably qualify. Raids and dungeons I qualify more as mid-tier content. It's kind of the content where you can use a lower tier build like an ad clear build and it'll work just fine in there. You can use an in-game build, it'll work just fine. That's more of more content where you just need to coordinate with your teammates more than anything. And you need to be able to do damage, do ad clear, a little bit of everything. So pretty much everything will work in there. It's more of that's your skill check and that's your cooperation check, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, because like we consider it mid tier, but technically raids and dungeons and GMs and trials are all considered like the end game content. Yet it is mid tier. So like when people are doing a build for end game content, that could be used for all of those. But if you're going specifically for like GMs or some shit, then you'd state that.
Yeah,
like
keep in mind when I say end game, when I say specifically me, when I say end game, I'm going off of how hard the content is, and for that, Grandmasters, Master Raids, and Master Dungeons are the three hardest things to do. That's what I put as what I say by end game. Raids themselves, yes, raids are the actual end game content as far as what we're meant to be doing at the end of the game. But as far as difficulty, it's about mid difficulty level. That's where I say about mid game. So in case there's any confusion.
Yeah, like I've also seen builds like where like people have built around like maybe I don't want to go off just like people that are like just really saturated and big. Like I know you probably heard of like Aztec Cross, or however you pronounce his name.
I mean, use examples everybody knows. Yeah, Aztec Cross is a big one. Maddox is a huge builder. He's one that I really like. I'm on something to him. I was watching him earlier.
I know like Aztec Cross, he'll make builds like that literally might only work for like that season. You know what I mean? Depending on like seasonal mods or some shit, and then like probably wouldn't want to use that shit after the fact. You know what I mean? So say hand cannons are like a big thing or some shit like that. Then you might want to use this build. Yeah, it's not. You could use Lucky Pants or some shit, or just go ahead and do SMGs or some shit, and then you have to use like solar melee stun shit. So you're getting your melee back a lot, and you also have your solar weapon or some shit like that. I don't know, like I said before, it really just depends on the state of the game and like what the seasonal mods are. But like this build could be used for something in the future, depending on certain mods, and then you could update that video and state that, or make a post or some shit and reference that build and be like, oh, this build will be very good for this season because there's these seasonal mods, you know what I mean? But like for the state of the game, like at the moment, yeah, it's not something you want to be taking into like the top tier content and shit. But like I said, shit changes. Like I know they're making a lot of changes to glaives next season, and they're making changes to stasis and adding shit. Like, so if you make a build now, it might be better in the future. But what's to stop you from making that build now and preparing for that stuff in the future? You know what I mean? Just because it's not in the game yet, it doesn't mean it'll never be in the game. It could be in the game. Shit could change. So just because it's not like, oh, that's not the shit right now, doesn't mean that it couldn't be the shit in the future.
True,
That makes sense.
and even the stuff that you said, like you mentioned Triton Price as an example. I mean, that's one where technically speaking, yeah, it's not necessarily great, but it could also have untapped potential too. Radiant Dance Machines there for a while was really kind of mid tier. Now, I mean, there's a good build for it that I've got an infinite melee build set up for it, so I can literally stay invisible forever, and it's good for mid to even late tier content if I play it right. I mean, there are plenty of exotics that don't necessarily look good on paper, but if you go and play around them, you might find some hidden mechanics or some hidden ways that mods can be used for. I mean, that's where buildcraft itself comes from, or starts with, and that is, where do you start with buildcraft? I mean, typically either you start with an exotic you want to build around. You either build around that, or you build around what do I want to accomplish. Like, do I want to make like an infinite invis build, or an infinite radiant build, or something like that? Or do I want to make a build specifically for this kind of content? I mean, any starting point can get you there, but that is like a starting philosophy on buildcraft is what is it you want to accomplish. And if you want to make a cool Triton build, you can start with that and say, okay, I want to make an awesome glaive build using Triton, and you go from there and build outwards. So you can still very easily make something like that good, and that's where a lot of these crazy builds end up coming from too.
Yeah, and like to reiterate on that fact, like the Triton Vice build, like I said, it's not crazy right now, but just to have that already, like it might just be a fun build at this state of the game. But just to have that, and then something else in the future comes along, or a change is made, or like I think in the video that I made with Trent Vice, I was thinking that I think it's the impact inductions. So it is called melee. Yeah, I thought the impact inductions was working with the glaive melee, but I was wrong because it was actually the void fragment that you do melee damage grants grenade energy, or get melee kills and it grants grenade energy. That was actually proccing my grenade to recharge faster, but it was still doing it at a significant rate. So I just said, okay, yeah, you can take those mods out and put something else in. Who knows? Maybe in the future, I don't know if they will ever do that, but in the future they might change it to where impact induction actually synergizes with glaive melee, and that might become like super fucking powerful. Like I know, like you said, Radiant Dance Machines, when Strand first came out, and Radiant Dance Machines, I don't know when Radiant Dance Machines actually came in, but when they first came out, I had this one build where I don't know what all the aspects are. Let me look. It's the suspend dive, ensnaring slam, used to proc Radiant Dance Machine. You'd have the dodge, and you can do that ensnaring slam over and over again until you're like your multi dodge ran out.
Mm-hmm.
And then they changed Radiant Dance Machines, or they like didn't let that work together anymore. So like if you try to do that aspect over and over again, like it doesn't work. You do it once and then you just cancel out your dodge or some shit like that, or you just can't do it in succession. So like that could have been a build I made. Could have put that video out, and then that's great, and then boom, it's gone. Like no, it doesn't work anymore. The whole build is trashed, and it could even be the opposite. A build could be mid-tier or mediocre, and then down the road something could change and just be like, wow, this build actually does work really well now. And you have the video out, you can just update them and just be like, yeah, this build's really good, or make another build video on it. I don't know why you would do that, but you could make another build video on it and explain it all over again if it's really been that long. But if it's something that you have done recently, you could easily reiterate on the fact of what's going on in this season. And I don't know how the episodes are going to work after the next season, and if the mods are just going to change every episode and they're going to things are going to stay how they are for a while, if they're going to make lots more changes as they go on, or like I don't know how they're going to do that, but yeah, shit can get worse, shit can get good, like shit can get better, and I feel like that's the basis of it. And I did have I am streaming right now, but I did have someone say this is their opinion. This is the dude that is telling me the most optimal stuff. He said his honest opinion about D2 is that just the game's like easy, but it's hard to master. And I do agree with that. Like talking about speedruns, doing stuff at the like most optimal, getting shit done. Yeah, it takes a lot of skill, and you're gonna have to have the right shit on to do that. And I do agree with that opinion. It's all about like technique, and even if you have a build on, it still might not help you. You might have to do things a certain way. Like that's why some people do those run through of GMs, like how to clear this the easiest way. There might be like a cheese or some shit like that. Like, and you might have to still be running a certain build just to do that cheese. But I feel like stuff in Destiny is just constantly changing all the time. So like you can make a good build one day, it could be shit the next. You can make a shitty build one day, and something's added to the game where it's really good. For example, like Mechaneer's Trick Sleeve. Like honestly, I don't like. I've always wanted to use sidearms. I've never really been a big fan of sidearms because at least I don't know of any of exotics that really like enhance sidearms. Besides Mechaneer's Trick Sleeve. But I know next season they're gonna be making. There was like leaked exotic changes, and one of them was the Mechaneer's Trick Sleeve. It's like once you get it procced, then you just killing stuff will reload. Getting a kill will reload the mag and reset the timer for the buff, the damage buff, and the reload buff or whatever. I forget the exact like wording of the whole change, but they're changing that, and who knows, that might make certain weapons more useful in PvE. But like you said, it might not be the most optimal. But like that's just an example of shit just changing and making old shit better. You know what I mean?
Yeah, builds do constantly change, and every little change that they make to fragments and aspects, that's how we get so many crazy builds. I mean, they make one small change, and that's how a lot of things, like again, the Guild Falcons, originally they didn't say that it made things volatile, but they eventually went and put it in there. Little changes like that. And yeah, I do agree. I mean, the game is easy to... I say it's easy to start. I still don't like the beginning game. I actually went through, I forgot when I did it, but they, at one point on the kiosk, you could actually play the new player experience, and I went through and checked all the opening missions, and I was like, it's fine, but they don't actually tell you much. So technically, I'd say yes and no. If you already know what you're doing, then technically, yeah, the game would be easy, but they don't have a very good new player experience, so that's what makes it hard. The systems themselves are not difficult, but there are some that are still more in-depth. I mean, for the average player, I mean, they're not going to have fully masterwork gear, they're not going to have optimized stats, they're not going to have, I mean, a lot of them aren't even going to have half of the exotics because you got to do a fairly difficult activity to do that. But once you know how everything works, then it becomes easy, yes. Once you know how all the Grandmasters works and where all the spots to stand are, then yeah, it's easy. But getting to that point, not necessarily. That's where the hard to master part comes into. I mean, I can go through and I can do light blade with a team that has done it many times before and clear it no problem at this point. But if you're going through and trying to match that the first time, I mean, it's hard. I mean, Grandmasters or even raids in general, when you're doing it the first time, it's insane. I remember when I was doing my freaking, what was it, Curses? I forgot the race called. I wanted to roll Curse of Disciple. It's been a while since I played.
Bow Disciple?
Bow Disciple. The first time we did that, I mean, that was insanely hard. I mean, trying to memorize 26 different symbols and doing all that weird crap. I mean, a third encounter where you got to go through with you got to speed run the area. I mean, it was crazy hard. Now, I mean, my buddies and I and my clan, I mean, we screw around and joke around when we're doing it. I mean, we did it last couple weeks ago when it was the raid of the week, and I mean, we screwed around for half the time, and we ended up clearing it. I think we damn near went flawless on the first one, and we only got to once on the second one. That would have been unheard of when we first came out, but we've gotten enough practice in, and we know what it is, so I mean, we've mastered that raid at this point. But when it first came out, not even close.
Yeah, like that raid is the only raid that I have a title for, and that I actually wanted to go for a title for, so I've like done the ins and out of like the whole thing. It's been a while, I can't really remember everything. But like I do feel like getting off like what we've been talking about, like build and like I feel like right now we're on the sort of topic of like how like what's the hardest shit to do in the game, if I'm correct. Like what's the most difficult. And I feel like the whole thing with Destiny 2 is actually learning what the fuck everything does and learning what the fuck everything like what learning what everything does and learning how you should do things and learning what to expect from things that you are doing. And like for example, I have one friend who he plays a game a lot. Like he streams a lot. Like he'll stay up. Like he's I do really long streams, but I never expected he stays up, does 12 hour streams, and does a bunch of shit. But like he has not like he doesn't really do raids. He doesn't really like do GMs. He doesn't even do like Legend Lost sectors to get exotic pieces. And I've asked him why. I'm like, you could run this and it would be fine. Like if he's at the same power level as me, like it's not like a Legend Lost sector is gonna like screw him over. You know what I mean? Like when the Legend Lost sector really does become easy once you, even if you don't have like a build set up. Like I've gone on my Warlock and Titan and just to get the exotics, and I have like barely any builds from, like not even. I've just thrown shit together, but like I'm so close to the power level that it's honestly like not that bad. But like him, he's at the same power level as me, and he still can't like beat that stuff. And I feel like people like him, just like having to learn, like he'd have to really like watch videos, and even if whether it's a build video or just an explanation video or weapon loadout video or some shit like that, like just having to learn like all those little things in the game, regardless of just like throwing on a build. Like even if you just throw on a build, you still have to learn exactly what the fuck you're doing, because like builds most of the time have, like you said, a synergy. Like there's things you have to do to proc certain things, but like there's also things that are just really easy, but those things might not be what you need for that thing. Like if you have to be going invisible all the time, but you still can't like fucking clear anything in a Legend Lost sector, then you're not gonna want to run Omnioculus. You're gonna want to run something else. You know what I mean? I think it just really depends on like the state of the game, like people's experience, like how people like their play style and all that, and that really like determines the difficulty of an activity for someone. Yeah, the difficulty is already predetermined by the game kind of, but I think that's sort of like an understatement, because I feel like it's also determined by the player itself, because like you said, or like I said already, like experience, play style, like just who the person is in that game. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and I mean, playing as much as you say yes too. I mean, Legend Lost Sector, that to me is like the beginnings of peeking into like in-game stuff, because that's where that's where you're really seeing, like, yeah, you'll see some champions doing some like some seasonal stuff occasionally. For the most part, you won't see stuff like that during like regular strikes. You're not going to see it during normal seasonal stuff. That is Legendary Lost Sectors are where you're really kind of peeking into, okay, this is the in-game, this is how you get your exotics, this is how you kind of intro into in-game. Because after that, everything from Legendary Lost Sectors up is going to have champions, and it's going to have a lot more coming at you. So that if you can't get past that portion or kind of get past some of the basics of it, you're kind of in a spot, because a lot of those like champions are annoying. Don't get me wrong, but you should still be able to take them out if you know what you're doing. Now, overloads will still say are too overpowered. I mean, I could take them out no problem, but they're still a bit more overpowered for what they're supposed to be. But yeah, if you know just the basics of how some of that stuff works, like unstops and overloads and bears, I mean, those are not difficult things to take out at legend or on legend status. So unless you're just really not trying, you should be able to get past that stuff eventually. Now, again, like you said, if you're not using any kind of build or you're not trying to use any kind of synergy, if you just don't understand your abilities at all, then yeah, you're gonna have a bad time, and that's kind of like the That's my litmus test. Is like, can you get past Legendary Lost Sectors? If yes, great. If not, then you probably need some more practice, or you need some help understanding the game, which is why I'm really excited I'm both excited and terrified for LFG to come in next season.
Oh, good.
Like, I am, and I say this, and I always forget that doing raids and stuff is something that only like 10 or 15% of the community has ever accomplished. I always forget stuff like that when I talk about this, because I do it so often and everyone in my clan does it. I always think, okay, everybody does this, when I know in fact that they don't. But the thing I like to do is I like to Sherpa people. I like to show them how to do raids. I never get day one clears. I've tried. I got a kid now, so I don't even get to try to do day ones anymore at all, even though I've never gotten a clear anyway. But the one thing I do pride myself in is that I've gotten every Sherpa title. So I tend to go through and I teach people how to do raids once I do it. That's what I like to do. Same with GMs. The thing that terrifies me is how are they going to implement LFG next season? Because if we're getting people that don't even understand the basics of the game in LFG and there's no way to filter them out, that could lead to some issues. Now,
Yeah, because aren't they? I know there's the guided game beta. I don't know if they're gonna do something like that where they're gonna like you're gonna have to select like if you know what you're doing or not, and it's gonna be something of that sort. Like I know I never used the guided game stuff, but I saw that there's like Seeker and then there's like a teacher or some shit like that, and I'm sure it's something like that would be implemented because if you get like 6 people, like if it's like an old raid and you get 6 people and not one of them knows what to do and that's not what you're looking for, I feel like that's probably a bad thing for that to happen,
and
especially when you're trying to look for somebody.
That's the exact kind of thing I'd see Bungie doing too, and that's what scares me.
Yeah, and like I don't know, like I think that they're heading in the right direction, but I feel like maybe that guided game beta is what they're working off of because like that's been in the game for like a good while now, and it says beta. So I mean, I take my wildest guess and say it's going to be somewhat similar to that. But I feel like also with there being like I know there probably is like a lot of people streaming. Like most streamers you see doing D2, like yeah, some of them are just chilling, doing activities. Some people are doing raid helps with viewers. Some people are doing GM carries with viewers. Some people are doing trials carries on the weekends with viewers. Some people are just playing, like I said. But the thing is, there's so many people fucking trying to do that not everyone's gonna get a chance. Like for example, me, I'm a returning player. Like I said, I don't know everything or I don't know every aspect, and I'd like to learn every aspect of every raid just so I know and I can join an LFG that says know what to do and be able to do everything because I know what to do. But I don't feel confident enough to join a raid that I only half know and have it say know what to do because I feel like the Destiny community can be so fucking toxic sometimes, and going into that can like put a lot of people like down and shit. And like for me personally, before we start talking, I spent like an hour and a half sitting on Discord LFG trying to get just one person in a raid group that was willing to teach Root of Nightmares, and I finally did get somebody. It took a long time, but like having to sit there for an hour and a half just to find one person to teach me one raid that'll probably take me an hour. Like I knew half the raid already, and I just needed somebody that was willing, like, or somebody that was okay with me not knowing something.
But see, that's what kills me too, because I like to Sherpa. I've met a few other Sherpas as well. I've gotten help with some, like if I got a whole new team and like I get some people, I like, hey, any one person kind of help me explain. Or I'll go through, I've got some guys that are Portuguese that I actually go through and I help them with raids every once in a while when they need help. They send me an invite and we got to Google Translate to talk to each other. But there are a lot of Sherpas, most Sherpas that are actually, going for, like actually wanting to help, not just going for the title. I mean, the title's nice, but most Sherpas I know are actively looking for people to teach. But it's hard for, like, you were having issue finding somebody to Sherpa you. It's hard for me to find people to Sherpa. Like, I'll put, hey, teaching new players and whatnot, and, like, 4 out of the 5 people that join in are like, oh, yeah, I've already done this one. It's like, I said I'm teaching new people. I mean, don't get me wrong. I don't like people that Sherpa just because they want the title. I like people who are actually teaching people to play the game. Like, what I often see is, and what really upsets me, is that Sherpas or people going for the title of Sherpa will get to the last boss. And I really wish they would fix this. They will just get to the last boss checkpoint. They will have people come in, and then they will show them how to do the last boss only just to get those clear points. Mm-hmm. And that pisses me off to no end. Like, if you're going to teach somebody, teach them how to do it. I have people that come in to my Sherpas all the time, and I'm trying to teach how, and every time somebody joins in, and I know it's going to end up being a problem, I have somebody comes in, they're like, yeah, I know what I'm doing, all right, I've done this before, and I'm like, okay, I need one person anyway, so just let me explain this to these guys. Every time that fails, they either interrupt, and they're like, well, you can cheese this, you can cheese that. Okay, dude, this is my raid, and I don't teach cheeses. If I'm going to teach somebody how to do the raid, I'm going to teach them how to do the raid properly. All the other stuff comes after they've learned the basics. Okay, I've kicked quite a few people off. Luckily, I got some good clan members, so if I say, hey, I need help with a Sherpa real quick, they usually hop in, and my clan members usually have the patience of saints. I mean, if they I need help, they usually come in, and they're pretty good about helping out and putting out some extra DPS if needed. But, I mean, a lot of these Sherpas are just really, I'm not gonna say toxic people, but the title itself, people want it without really putting in the work. I don't think you should be able to get the title or have it count unless you take somebody through the entire raid, not just the last boss. That's just my opinion on that. But I mean, there's what you're saying. You were having trouble finding someone to Sherpa you. We have trouble finding people to Sherpa. That LFG, I think, would be a great way to do that. But I hope there's a way to, yeah, and I hope there's really a way to actually filter. Like, if you can, for example, if you can put yourself down as a Sherpa or a guide, you should have to already have the Sherpa title or enough clears to say, yes, you have enough clears from start to finish, you can guide people in this game. Or you should have enough people that actually vote what is supposed to be the voting system, you know, at the end, getting the commendations. That's not supposed to be tied to any rewards if you're going to do it correctly. I play a lot of Final Fantasy XIV, and the commendations, you literally get nothing out of it except for the chance to eventually become a mentor. So if you're actually doing what you're supposed to, you can become a mentor. So the commendation should be tied to your ability to become a mentor or a Sherpa for these raids, or for this, like, actually showing how helpful you actually are, versus, hey, everybody just give out whatever at the end of it.
I feel like, I don't know, this might be kind of throwing it out there, but I feel like maybe they could do something with titles, because titles usually involve most of the aspects in the game. So, like, if somebody were to have that title already, like, for a raid, they could be considered a Sherpa for that raid, because they've done every aspect of that raid, and they've done the challenges, they've done hard mode, like, you have to do pretty much a little bit of everything to be able to do that. Or like you said, have for someone to have a ton of clears before they can get that title, not just carrying new people through. And I do think that's a dick move. Like right now, I couldn't teach. I would love to be able to teach other people like how to do certain things. I'd love to go into Discord LFG and see somebody that says, "Oh, I need someone to teach me this." I'd love to fucking do that. But first, I gotta learn everything before I fucking do that.
Yeah.
But like for me, I've done shit where it's like I'm trying to learn something. Like, for example, duality. I wasn't trying to learn duality, but like this one guy, I went in there. I was looking to actually farm it, but he was like, "Oh no, we're not doing that." And luckily, I did get the exotic, but he one tapped every boss or some shit. But if somebody was trying to do like a run of that, and like they sort of knew what to do, but they didn't really, and that dude just ran through it all and just was like, "Yep, that's it. They're done. You got the exotic. You don't really have to touch this dungeon ever again." It's like, okay, but for the people that want to learn and then help other people learn and shit like that, like for example myself, like that's not really beneficial to me. But I do think that like having more people that are actually qualified, like as you said, to do that stuff would be really nice. And like having that stated, or having something that really like dials down on making sure that they're actually gonna teach someone, not just, oh yeah, we're sherpering just to get this title and shit. And like I don't know, I feel like that's kind of just a dick move just to do that shit to other people when they're actually trying to learn, because like I'm trying to learn everything so I can help other people learn, you know what I mean?
Well, what's upsetting is that a lot of people don't realize that's what's happening too. I've seen a lot of people that want to learn the whole raid and join in at the last boss. Like, I can see it filling up. And if these people have never gotten it clear before, they don't understand that they're being farmed out just for this title. Mm-hmm. And technically speaking, I mean, technically, everybody could get a day one clear. I mean, obviously, the majority of people don't, but technically, everybody could get one. But there's only so many Sherpas that can go around, because once somebody's cleared a raid, they won't count towards the clear stat again. Now, obviously, it's going to be more Sherpas than there are day ones, but technically speaking, I mean, yeah, they're being farmed for that, and they can get that clear off of them, but then someone else is still got to go back and teach them the rest of the raid, too, and not get the credit for it. Now, again, most Sherpas I know don't do it necessarily for the emblem, but it is nice, and it does kind of help show people, like, yeah, I can show you how to do this, I've cleared this, that's what I do. Yeah, it's an aspect that I don't like. It could very easily be fixed by making it to where for it to count, that person's got to be in the entire raid with you, or they had to have cleared everything with you, but I don't know if they're going to fix that anytime soon, or if it's even on the radar.
I think that would be a good thing to, like, you have to carry one person, like, if you're going to Sherpa somebody through, like, a raid, you must do every encounter in that raid with them, not just, and even at that point, you could still just, like, throw someone on ad clear and have, like, for example, Root of Nightmares. I did it twice, and I honestly had, like, I had a half-ass clue of what I was doing. But like the one time I literally just ended up getting ad cleared the entire raid. Like there's literally an ad clear position on every single encounter in that raid. So I mean, like, you really don't really need to know what you're doing. So you could just pull in 2 new people, throw them on there, and go through the whole thing, and that would still count as a Sherpa. You know what I mean? So like, I feel like they probably have to do something that's more like specific and kind of like I said, dial down on like making sure that they actually are teaching. And like I said, I don't know how they're gonna do that. Like I don't know, but hopefully that is that. They do that with the LFG thing coming out next season.
I'm hoping, because I'm seeing LFGs that are going to be a great success, or it's going to be full of just toxicity, and people aren't going to want to use it, and they're going to go back to Bungie. Now, I don't see that happening, but I am seeing that the first month or two is probably definitely going to be full of growing pains, because the majority of people don't use LFG on Bungie. Most people that go on there are looking to do raids and GMs. Most people don't do that. So when this is more accessible to everybody, there's going to be a flood of people trying to do some of this stuff. And I think that's where it's going to be an issue. We really need people to actually be able to go on and legitimately be able to teach these people, not just... And don't get me wrong, I think if you can go in as a teacher, I don't think many people are going to volunteer to teach something. You're not going to be able to go in and say, hey, come to this boss checkpoint. Hopefully, if you're doing like an LFG in game, it will force you to start from the beginning, and in that case, you can't really form the boss. You would actually have to actually teach them. So hopefully that's that kind of plays into that. Now,
You'd
you
have
see
to
that
start fresh.
Yep. Now, hopefully, we can also make it to where you have to have a mic on if you click mic, because that's one thing too. A lot of raids and a lot of people that aren't used to talking are gonna have to get used to some of the stuff that you're not used to doing, like coordination and talking, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of that stuff. I mean, it's never been a big issue in other games because it's kind of automatic. Like I do a lot of, I said I play Final Fantasy 14, I play other games. You can kind of chat in game with that, but this is one where you can't really stop and chat. You need to actually have a mic, so that's going to be a big one. So raids are going to be interesting. Grandmasters are also going to be interesting because again, that's the hardest content we've got. And I see a lot of people trying to go into that now.
Yeah, surprisingly, I did a King's Fall and I like literally just learned like every aspect of it. And this one guy didn't know what he was doing, and it was, I think it might have just been an Orc CP because it was the Formidable raid last week, and King's Fall was, and I was just trying to get the Touch of Malice just to have it, and this one dude, the dude who put up the post, actually didn't know what he was doing, or I think that might have been it, or it was, there was 2 people, and I think we actually ran through the whole raid. Yeah, this was it. There was 2 people. Only he could talk to him because he was playing on PlayStation, and I think you can set up Discord. I know you can do it on Xbox. I'm not too sure about PlayStation, but I know on PlayStation or Xbox you can set up Discord. But he said he couldn't set up Discord or something like that, so we couldn't talk to him. But he was still talking to him because he must have been his friend or something. But once we got to the last encounter, his friend was gone, and I was trying to ask him like, "Oh, is he coming back?" Because like none of us can talk to you, and like you can't hear us or whatever. And so I legit like typed out every mechanic in Oryx, and we did it. We started farming it over and over again, and maybe that was just him as a player. He was able to pick up on all that and like do all that, but like he was doing everything correctly and typing the stuff out in the chat, and I was just surprised. So like there are instances where that shit happens depending on whatever you're doing, but like there is a lot of shit where like there's no way you're doing comms. Like you're not doing Val without comms. Like fuck no, especially if you're teaching someone. Like if they have no fucking clue what you're doing, you're never making it through an encounter on that raid.
Yeah, especially the first one. I'd say the first one is probably harder than the rest of them, just because of how much you have to. It's because every symbol is used in one way or another. That one is insane.
Yeah, especially on the second encounter. Well, I don't even know what the encounters are called, but the one with the ogre. You got to go into the rooms.
Yep.
Yeah, caretaker. Yeah, that's definitely. Like I'm hoping that it's good because even I would use that until if I'm still not at the point I want to be at and have everything learned, I'd still like to have that just to be able to have that accessibility to learn something, because I feel like it is different when you watch. Like I could go on YouTube and watch a video, but that's not the same as actually going into the game and actually fucking doing it.
Yeah. And even when you know what you got to do, there's still things you just have to be able to communicate. You can't just wing it, or you can't just hope for the best or type it out. You have to be able to communicate, and you can't type out. If you don't have a keyboard attached to your PlayStation or anything, you can't really type out on the keypad there anywhere near enough. So that's going to be interesting when LT pops out for some of the raids. So yeah, I can't.
It's also typing is just a pain in the ass.
Yep.
But I think we're very off topic from what this conversation started off as. But
Yeah.
I really did enjoy talking about a little bit of everything, though. I had a lot of fun being able to discuss a lot of things. I mean, like I said, I don't have too many like friends that play this game, so I don't always have people ready available to talk about shit that goes on in the game or my thoughts on certain things in the game. Like I do have some, but like when everybody works and they live in different states and they have their own situations, so like not everybody is able to get on. Times there's weeks where it goes on and I don't have anybody to talk to. It's like just me, myself, and I got people watching me that like don't normally watch me play this game, because like I mainly play Destiny now, but I do also play other games, and they sort of watch me for playing those other games.
Mm-hmm.
So like when they come in, like me talking to them about something, it's not going to be the same as me talking to somebody who actually knows the game. You know what I mean? So it was nice to talk to you about all this stuff and get your opinion and have that mutual disagreement on that. But no, we got that settled. It was very nice meeting you.
Okay. I tell you what, man, shoot me a friend request. I'm on pretty often. The clan I play with, we're mostly adults. We got kids and everything, but we play pretty much damn near every day. My buddies and I just finished up our Grand Masters. I just got mine gilded for the season. But I mean, we can do basically everything but Last Wish. It's the only one I can't teach. That and Guardian, I got most of it, but a buddy of mine usually teaches. But we basically do everything from GMs to raids. I mean, we knock it all out. So, and we all play pretty often. We're as funny as we make it, we're all pretty decently skilled at it, but we do play every day. I mean, I'm on about to just farm armor on my Titan, but if you ever want to play with somebody or someone or we're on, man, just let me know. I mean, we're usually doing raids on the weekends or doing stuff on the weekday. I'm going to hop off and probably do some random GM help or help some people with some random GMs on my Titan here in a little bit. So if you need someone to play with, man, we're on pretty often.
If I sent you a friend request. If I ever need anything, I'll hit you guys up. I am staying in my own clan just for like my community purposes. That's sort of why I made it. Like I was in a previous clan with some of my clanmates, but like they were always on at different times, so I sort of just made my clan to start up. Like if I get anybody in my Destiny community, like they can join. And like in my Discord, I added some stuff, so like more like clan based things, like shit that the clan is doing, kind of thing.
Yeah,
so I'm gonna stay in my thing.
I can send you. We got people in our Discord clan that aren't in the actual Destiny clan. So if you just want to play with some people, I'll try and send you. If you want, I can send you into Discord. You can chat with us and say, "Hey, you want to do something anytime?" And we're there. No obligation to join in on the clan. Or like we just happened to join the same clan because our old one was basically dead, so we joined a friend's clan and we're on that Discord. But we've got people in that Discord that have their own clan or that do stuff with their own PvP clan and come do PvE with us. So it's whatever. If you ever want to do anything, that's what we do.
If you send people over my way, it's like I'm trying to learn everything. I don't know everything, but like as soon as I learn everything and I'm able to teach everything, like I'm 100% down. Like that's why I made the clan, for people in the clan to do stuff together. Not only that, but help teach other people that even are just like know the community or want to be a part of the community. I mean, everybody's a part of multiple communities, but just to be able to be another option for other people to use to help them do stuff. Like I'm usually on like Monday through Wednesdays, like I said, I like job stuff and just real life situation shit. Like yeah, you can't play all the time, but I mean in the future hopefully maybe that changes. I'm able to play a little bit more and be able to help more people and stuff like that, because I mean yeah, it's a game, but like this is shit that people do all the time, is people's enjoyment and stuff, and to be able to help people enjoy that more and give them a better understanding of what they're doing, I would love to do that. So I like, even if it was just like a clan thing, like with two separate clans that help for one purpose, like that would be amazing.
Sounds good, man.
Oh yeah. So I sent you a friend request. I will hit you up if I ever need you, and it was really good talking to you.
All right, you too, man. You have a good one.
You have a good one too. Peace.